Imagine you were given the chance to meet with the murderer of your child. What would you want to say to the killer? What would you want to hear? What would you want to do? One such extraordinary meeting did happen between a Christchurch family and the woman they asked to babysit their baby son and who ended up murdering the boy. The woman they invited into their home turned out to be a serial killer. The horror she inflicted on the family began unfolding more than a decade ago. Richard Langston reports.
For the first time in nearly 13 years, Calvin and Loree Tinian returned to the house where their infant son was murdered. It is a journey that only a few months ago they would have found too painful to make. Where did Michael, where did he sleep?
He slept right here in front of the fireplace. That's where his cot was.
For Calvin, the visit brings back the helplessness he felt at not being able to protect his son.
I feel as mad and as angry as you could possibly feel right now. I just want to get out of here. We were invaded in this room, eh? Yeah. I don't want the feeling I'm having over myself being in here. Yeah.
Their son was just 8 months old, blue-eyed and healthy. He'd been left in the care of a neighbour for just 40 minutes. Michael Tinian had been brutally suffocated. A pillow was held over his face while he slept. It was his murder here in this Christchurch house on May 28, 1984, which eventually led to the uncovering of one of this country's worst ever baby killers. Her name, Lisa Turner. She's in her 13th year of serving a life sentence. Not just for the murder of Michael Tinian, she also killed both her own babies and attempted to kill the babies of 2 other families. She's now considered rehabilitated enough to be allowed out of jail 4 days a week to work in a nearby factory. The parole board is again this month to consider whether to release her. In early 1984, Turner lived next door to the Tinians. She listed her occupation as babysitter. She had already killed her own 2 daughters, Megan in 1980 and Cheney in 1982. She had also attempted to kill the other 2 babies. She'd tricked authorities into believing they were all cot deaths. Loree had known her for only a matter of months. She'd asked Turner to babysit that morning, mainly because she felt sorry for her.
Got to know each other. She told me about her 2 little girls that had died of a cot death and showed me photos of them. And my heart went out to her, and I sort of thought that maybe spending some time with my children would help her in her grief process.
Loree's compassion was about to cruelly rebound on her. She had returned home to find that Turner was behaving strangely. She insisted that Loree check Michael. Loree resisted, as she knew he would be sleeping. But Turner insisted. In fact, Turner had already killed Michael while Loree was out. It was Turner who eventually went into his bedroom.
The next thing I knew, she was yelling out, "Loree, phone an ambulance." And I was thinking, what on earth are you talking about? And so I started coming out the hall saying, "What are you going on about?" She said, "Ring an ambulance, Michael's not breathing."
Calvin had rushed home from work and gone into the room where Michael's body had been laid on the bed.
I sat with Michael quite some time. I felt his warmth leave until he was starting to go cold, eh? I didn't know what to do. I mean, he was my boy, even though he was dead. I come home to my boy, and that was just the way it was. So I sat in here with him for about 20 or 30 minutes. And leaving him was quite hard because I didn't know what to do. I mean, we were very young, we were naive.
As she had done with the deaths of her own 2 daughters, Turner made Michael's look like cot death. Initially, Loree refused to believe the worst of her neighbour.
Actually, later on, Calvin made the comment, "She must be jinxed. You know, how can 3 babies die in her care from a cot death?" And I remember saying to him, "You know, that is an awful thing to say. You know, they're so awful. I mean, she must be really feeling it because another baby's died. That must stir up a lot of memories for her."
Boys!
But that morning, nearly 13 years ago, would profoundly affect the Tinians. Today they have 5 children, but they can never forget the child who was robbed of the chance of growing up with them. For years they tried to put the murder behind them, but for Laree there was always the guilt of having left Michael with Turner. And no matter how hard they tried, there was always the gap in the family lineup to stir the anger and grief.
For the first few years, I think I just buried it. I just buried the grief right down into the pit of my stomach. But 10 years later, it doesn't stay there, and it sort of started to come up. And I really, it felt like when the feelings and emotions and memories started coming back, I really felt like I was falling into a pit, and I wasn't going to get out of it. And that was incredibly scary.
They were living in what they describe as a silent trauma, feeling they could not talk to people about the thing that was quietly destroying them. Calvin was at times so overwhelmed by anger, he thought of killing Turner.
It took some time for me to change my mind about wanting to actually really be so vengeful that I would just go and take her out one day if I ever got the chance.
This woman helped bring about that change. Psychotherapist Vanda McKercher began counselling the Tinians to help them deal with their grief.
And as we talked, it seemed too that as part of the healing it would be important to be able to sit across the table and talk to Lise. And so we asked if that could be a part of their grieving and healing process.
Fleur Grenfell is in charge of Arahatu Women's Prison, where Turner is kept. She supported the idea of the meeting.
There is no getting away from what people have seen for themselves. The pictures of the hurt and the pain that's been caused will stay with the offender for the rest of their lives, and they can no longer justify their offending to themselves or rationalise away the effect they've had on their victims. All of that becomes a lie when they see for themselves the hurt and the pain and the anguish.
Turner could have refused to see the Tinians, but she agreed to face them. Seldom, if ever, in the history of the justice system has there been a meeting like it. The family of a murder victim was allowed into jail to confront the killer. The Tinians hadn't seen Lisa Turner since November 1984, when she was led from the dock. Now, they were sitting just across the table from her.
She seemed nervous, but I don't think she was as nervous as what we were, which she didn't appear to be. And she was weepy. She sort of wept a wee bit here and there.
Calvin says he was unnerved by how friendly Turner appeared to be towards Laree, but with him, she was immediately on the defensive.
But I actually asked him for him to actually tell me what she wanted to say to me, and which got her talking, and she didn't say too much, but I then realised she wasn't about to say much to me, so I just launched an absolute verbal attack on her, and it continued for about 30 minutes. I got out everything, explained things to her, told her what I thought, what she has done to my family and myself, the trauma she put in on this family. At that time, I told her, if you were so much inclined in hurting and killing, then why not go and do it to a cat or a dog or something, if that was your way that you were, you know, this is not a natural thing that people do.
I wanted to know why she'd killed Michael that day.
What did she say to you?
She said that she was jealous of him. She was jealous because he was so beautiful.
Turner admitted to police that she had killed Michael, but she had always denied killing her own 2 daughters, Megan, who was just 11 weeks old, and her second daughter, Cheney, who was just 6 weeks old. To Laree, she finally admitted murdering them.
I asked her why she killed Megan, and she said that she was a very sickly child, and she was always in and out of hospital on breathing apparatus, and it was a mercy killing because she couldn't stand to see her suffering so much.
Laree found that hard to accept, particularly when there was expert medical evidence at the trial that Megan was a healthy child and only had breathing difficulties when she was alone with Turner. What about Cheney? Did she explain that?
She said that Cheney was an unwanted pregnancy. She was never wanted. After Megan's death, she didn't want another child, and the only reason she had for that was that she was an unwanted child. But again, the evidence all through the trial, that the doctors talked about how everyone that knew her back then, that she wanted this baby. She desperately wanted to have another child. So again, that what she told me that day didn't ring true with me either.
Megan is buried in Christchurch, not far from Michael's grave. Laree visits her grave out of sympathy. It was chilling for her to listen to Turner's explanations for killing her daughters. But as disturbing as it was, the Tinians needed to hear the explanations for themselves. The meeting for them was life-changing.
I took control back. She'd taken control away from me 12 years ago, and she's been like a looming monster in my memory, and I took that control back. I wasn't the one being intimidated. She was the one that was being intimidated at that meeting, and I always feared seeing her in the street or just running into her by accident. I always feared that because I didn't know what my emotions would do, and I've conquered that fear now.
It took quite some time to actually come down off the high. I actually remember going around for quite a bit. It took about 3 days for it to go away, and I compared it to seeing my children born. If you've ever seen your child born, you buzz around for 24 hours, on a natural high, and that's exactly what it was for me. I put things in perspective. I talked to myself in my head continually. It just made me feel so much better, being able to, instead of having all these memories I had of her, of what she's done and how she's destroyed my life up until then, that, when I walked out of that room, was gone. I had all these new memories and thoughts and feelings, and in that room, she wasn't in charge.
During her trial, psychiatrists said Turner was a woman with an hysterical personality disorder, a person filled with anger and jealousy who wanted to be the centre of attention. Babies took that away from her. She told one psychiatrist, "I'm a bloody monster," and she told the detective who arrested her, "Thank God you finally caught me." Turner's been receiving psychological counselling for 5 years, and for that same period she's been allowed out for weekends to stay at home with her mother and a friend. For 9 months she's been allowed to work at a local factory. In the past, the parole board's not been satisfied. She's been ready for release. She's been before it 6 times in the last 6 years. She's about to go before the board for the 2nd time in 4 months, which would indicate she's closer to release than she's ever been. A friend of Turner's told 2020 she has changed, where once she wouldn't talk about the killings, she now admits to them. That friend also told 2020 the meeting with the Tinians helped her realise the horror of what she's done.
Bye. Bye. Daniel Boone was a man.
The Tinians' happy moments are now almost free of the shadow of Turner. They put that down to the benefits of the meeting. Where there was once only anger and bitterness about the way Michael died, they can now remember him for the happy baby he was.
Sorry, boys. Oh, sorry.
But they cannot forget the murder nearly destroyed them. And they wonder who can ever guarantee that Lisa Turner, if she's released, will not kill again.
We were reassured by the parole board that she would have supervision around young children. Now, why does she need supervision around young children if they think she's been cured? And also, how can you supervise someone around young children 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? It's impossible. And that is what my concern is, that she will have access to another young baby one day and she'll take the opportunity to do it again.
Because she is an opportunist. She only takes a couple of minutes to do what she needs to do. Sad as it is.
In 3 days' time, Lisa Turner will again appear before the parole board. She may also again cross the path of the Tinians. Laree and Kelvin will travel to Wellington to appear at the same hearing and put their case as to why they believe Turner should not be released.